Hey everybody, so today we are going to be tying some woolly buggers. They're a little bit larger fly, with a little bit bigger tail on them. Here's an example of one I tied earlier. Bigger tail, big hackle looking wings. So since they are a bigger fly, we're going to be using a little bit bigger hook. I'm using the Mustad streamer hooks, a little bit bigger size to them. And so first thing that I do when I'm tying is I'm actually going to take the hook and flatten down the barb here. And so I just take some pliers and flatten that down. I don't keep my fish, so I'm just fishing catch and release. Get that in the vise there. And so you can get hooks that are barbless, where they don't have the hook on them to start. But these hooks that I have the barbs on them, so I flatten them down so I can catch and release and it doesn't do as much damage to the fish's mouth. So first things first, after we flatten down our hook, is I'm going to take some thread. I use a Danville's thread. I'm just going to use some black. And what I do is I just kind of take it and start towards the head or the eye of the hook and work my way back the shank. Getting a good base of thread on there. And I typically stop right behind where the tip of the hook is. Cut off my excess. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take some marabou feathers. And so they're just kind of the fluffy feathers. They come in a bunch of different colors, and they typically come in a bag like this. They'll have marabou on it. I'm using the olive color today. It's all personal preference, so you can use whatever colors work best for you and whatnot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this kind of bundle that I have kind of pulled apart here and just kind of tear that apart. And then I have a good chunk here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and work these back here and pinch it. What I'm looking for here is kind of a length. So what I'm looking for is about 1.5 shanks. So I start where I started my thread there towards the eye. And so what I'm looking for is about 1.5 shanks. It's probably a little bit much, so I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. About 1.5 shanks. A little bit more there. Perfect. And so what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to switch hands and just kind of pinch it there and lay that exactly where my thread is just sitting there waiting, and kind of do a loose wrap and cinch it down there. And I'm actually just going to take and work my thread forward, kind of wrapping this base. Holding these feathers up here. All of my materials are actually hand-me-downs. So an older gentleman that I know passed away, and his family was going through all his materials and wanted to get rid of them and knew I tied flies, so it got a hold of me and I had taken them off their hands. So a lot of this stuff is kind of older materials that he kind of had and had been sitting in his basement for quite a while, so I have no clue how old some of these materials are. But once you work your way up towards the front with that marabou, you're just kind of make a base, cut it off towards the front, and then work your way back. And so once I get back here to where I left off my base of my thread underneath there, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in some chenille. And again, it's all personal preference. You can tie in whatever colors and whatnot you want. You can use a bunch of different color combinations depending on what kind of marabou you're using. I've been having some pretty good luck with this black, and I really have been liking the way that those have turned out. So I'm going to use that on here today. And what I'm going to do to get this ready to tie in is I'm going to take and pinch it between my two fingers and just kind of take my thumbnail and try and get this fuzzy stuff off here at the end. And underneath that fuzzy stuff is going to be this black thread. And so that's what I'm going to use to tie in. So what I do here is I just take and lay that on top of the shank there and do another loose wrap and cinch it down and tie that in. Cut off that excess thread. And so the next thing that I'm going to tie in is going to be some light wire. It's just going to add durability to the body after we wrap everything forward. Again, loose wrap and cinch it in. Time or two. Cut off the excess and just kind of lay that back here. If it'll cooperate. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. The next thing we're going to do, again, all personal preference, is we're going to get some hackle ready. And so what that is going to do is we're just going to take, let's go with a little bit more towards the middle here. Kind of a longer piece that has some good volume to it. And take it and work it towards the base there and just kind of pluck that off. And so when you pluck that off, the whole feather is going to look like this. And this fluffy stuff down here towards the base of where it was connected to the piece of hackle there is really not the texture we're looking for. So what you're going to do is just kind of pinch that in between your fingers and just kind of pull that off. And that's going to leave you with a sturdy base towards the bottom. Like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip that around and just pinch here at the front of the feather. Just a little piece. And gently work my fingers back to get these fringes going and working back this way. Give it some volume. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this front of this feather here and lay it on top. And do a loose wrap and cinch. Cinch that in. Cut off my excess, making sure I'm not cutting the stem of the feather there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to work that towards the front again, stopping a little bit behind the eye of the hook so I can give myself some room to make a head. And now the first thing that I'm going to do is actually I'm going to take my chenille here and just kind of work it over itself and wrap it towards the back here and work my way forward, building up my body along that shank. Doesn't have to be super, super tight. You don't want to pull too hard and break your hook. So once you get to the top, you just kind of make a couple wraps around the hook with your thread there. Snip off your excess, set it aside, use it for some other hooks, make another wrap or two, secure it down. So the next thing that we're going to bring forward is going to be this hackle. And so what I do here, you can either take this sturdier part of the stem and use your fingers and wrap it forward, or another thing that you can do is take these, they're called hackle pliers, and just kind of clip on to the end of them and just start wrapping forward. Making sure I don't catch that end of that hook there. Every once in a while, I just kind of take and wiggle it back and forth like so. Kind of gives it some extra volume and just kind of works the barbs of those feathers in a little bit better. You just kind of keep working towards the front, spreading it even out there. And then once you get to the front where you want to stop, wrap around a couple times, cinch it down pretty good, and then trim off that excess there. I typically peel that back and give it a couple extra turns to make sure that that's sealed down nice and tight. And so the only thing we're left back here with is this tinsel, this wire. And so I'm actually going to take this the opposite direction that I've been taking everything else and just kind of wiggling it to get it in between the barbs of the hackle. And all this is really doing is giving the fly some more durability. And so when the trout comes and nibbles on it and whatnot, their teeth are actually pretty sharp, so they can do some damage on some flies. So all this is really doing is taking all your hard work and kind of giving it insurance policy so that it's going to last more than 1 or 2 times. Again, so I'm wiggling it and working it more towards the eye here. And once I get up towards the front, I do this same thing as all the other ones and just kind of wrap around a couple times, making sure I have it cinched in. Cutting off our excess. And then I'm going to peel these feathers back and start making a head. And so all you're really doing here is just kind of giving, again, another insurance policy that everything's tied down good. Nothing's going to slip out. It's all nice and even. Good head there. And then to finish it off, I'm going to be using a whip stitch. You can do it with your fingers or you can use this fancy smancy tool. I typically do it twice just to make 100% sure. Give it a couple turns and cinch it down. Just going to cut that off there. And there you have a woolly bugger.